Quin Snyder has resigned as a head coach of the Utah Jazz. We told you back in late March that this was a distinct possibility, that we were hearing that Quin Snyder was contemplating resigning. And we told you again on April 28th that Quin Snyder was likely to resign. And now here we are on June 6th, and Quin Snyder made it official yesterday that he resigned as the head coach of the Utah Jazz. The whys and the hows of this are very complicated because you don't see these situations present themselves often, especially in a place like Utah, where coaches generally come here to retire. And you look at Quin Snyder, almost a decade of service to the Utah Jazz. When he was hired, he was somewhat of a reclamation project, coming really to the Jazz in tatters as a head coach after what happened at Missouri and that whole scandal and thing. But after packing his bags and globetrotting as an assistant coach throughout Europe, the G League, the NBA, Quin Snyder did a fantastic job. He was a rousing success as the head coach of the Utah Jazz. But things started to go sideways last season. We saw the marks of a coach that was dealing with fatigue and burnout. He had hip replacement surgery. They go through an offseason where, frankly, not much changed. And then everything changed. Ryan Smith was the now owner. The Miller family sold to Ryan Smith. Immediately, a massive contract extension created issues with the salary cap, created issues with chemistry and leadership in the locker room. And then you fast forward to the trade deadline this past February, where nothing was done. No moves were made. Outside of trading an expiring contract of a guy in Joe Ingles who had torn his knee ligament, nothing was done, and Quin was frustrated. Quin was assured by Ryan Smith and Justin Zanuck and the management team that, in fact, they would be making deals to add to this team to make them more competitive, and instead they stood pat, and they lost again, and there were significant chemistry issues again, and Quin Snyder voiced frustration at the deadline. And through this period of the offseason when they lose to Dallas in the playoffs, Quin again has hip replacement surgery, steps away, and then they start talking about a contract extension again. They offered Quin Snyder as much as 5 years. At the end, they had offered him 3 years. He turned them both down. And the deal breaker, according to sources close to the situation, who tell me Quin Snyder wanted input on the roster that he was going to be coaching, it was a deal breaker. They said, not so fast. The Utah Jazz were unwilling to give Quin Snyder veto power over his roster, and ultimately that was the tipping point. The relationship is not broken. They are parting as friends, and Quin Snyder still, as I am told, has passion to coach in the NBA, but it looks like he is going to take a year off. He is going to recover from this hip. I think he is going to digest and download all of the things that have happened on this team in the last year. And Jake, frankly, this is a massive void for the Utah Jazz to fill.
Yeah, and it's a big moment overall for the organization in a multitude of ways. And I think that I do agree. Quin was a rousing success as a head coach for the Utah Jazz. I do think that the Jazz were really successful with him. Now, they didn't get as far as they wanted to, and I think that you're always going to have people who are going to say, well, they didn't win anything. That might be true, but I think at the same time they were consistently a contender in the Western Conference, and I think that with the roster you have currently is a pretty damn good job. I have to say, when you compare their roster to other rosters in the Western Conference, Quin did a nice job. I'm not really here to have the conversation about adjustments in the postseason or whatever people want to run out there about hating on Quin. But what I am here to say is that I think that I understand why Quin feels the way he does, where he wants this power to have say over the roster he's going to coach, because frankly, again, and it's no shade to Rudy Gobert personally, but that extension, it really, I think rubbed Quin the wrong way. So I don't blame the guy. He just had hip surgery. He could use a year off. He'll come back next season, not this coming one, but the following, and he'll do his thing. And more power to him. But I think for what's left for Jazz fans, the organization, the roster, I think there's a lot of questions here. Obviously the main one is the Donovan Mitchell situation. I'm here to tell you once again, the Don to the Knicks, Don to the Heat rumor mill that I just saw raging yesterday, it's unnecessary. Frankly, it is just really unnecessary. The conversation that should be had is just how much power Donovan Mitchell has over who's going to be the next head coach of the team. And if I'm the Utah Jazz, if I'm Ryan Smith, if I'm Danny Ainge, I'm not going to go, I'm not just going to be like, hey, Don, who you want to be the head coach, and that's who we'll get. But I am going to allow Don to speak on the topic. I am going to allow Don to feel like his opinion is valued, because I think that's really important through this process. So if I'm the Jazz moving forward from the Quin situation, that's how I would handle it. But we'll see, what route they decide to go. And by the way, I do think, last week we talked about how, Ryan Smith as an owner really needs a win. This whole situation, this head coaching hire could be that win that we've kind of been talking about on the show, depending on who they get.
Yeah, I'm curious because I actually think this is a huge moment in time for the Utah Jazz. I cannot overstate the importance of this hire. Whoever this team hires is going to really, in my opinion, point this ship in whichever direction it's going to go, because roster changes are coming. I think we know that.
Yeah.
Whoever the coach of this team is has to win, and they have to win now, because you have so much turmoil currently around this team. Quin Snyder resigning only added fuel to the fire about the dysfunction that took place in this organization over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And again, I think much to your point, and we have talked a lot about Ryan Smith needing a win.
Yeah.
Now you desperately need a win. And my question is, and this may seem trivial, and I certainly don't mean it to be that way, how can you release uniforms now?
Yeah.
Because we've heard that within the next 10 days, essentially as soon as the NBA Finals are over, when teams can again make news on their own, that the Utah Jazz had every intention of releasing their new uniforms. And I think now you can't do that. I think now, with Quin Snyder quitting, with so much turmoil in the locker room, with so many questions about your ability to execute on the floor and off the floor, you cannot take another PR dump if you are the Utah Jazz. And that's what this would be.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to, again, I don't mean to
Well, it sounds
trivialize
harsh.
uniforms
Yeah.
and I don't mean it to sound harsh. I
Yeah.
think the reality is that Quin Snyder quitting like this is a blight. It's a black eye. Even though we all knew it was coming, we've been reporting this for 2 months. It's a black eye on this team. He is a well-respected coach in the NBA.
Yeah.
And it is a little surprising that it took this long to make this happen. And what this tells you is the Utah Jazz, as we have reported, wanted Quin Snyder back as their head coach.
Yeah.
And from what I am told, they went to him and said, hey, we need to move.
Yeah.
We need to make a move. And I think what's interesting is what's happening in Charlotte is quite important to this search, because I think when we're talking about who the next head coach of the Jazz is going to be, I think you need it to be somebody who will come in with swagger and respect. That's the thing that worries me about all this Johnny Bryant talk.
Yeah.
He is an inexperienced leader. That's the issue for Johnny Bryant. Now, obviously, he has extensive experience from his time here in Utah with Don. I think Donovan Mitchell should absolutely, positively have input on who the next coach will be. But I just don't know that Johnny Bryant's the right guy because he doesn't have experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I already think that the guy you hire is going to be coming into a difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think the tough part is when you're hiring a head coach, the things you have to consider, like look at the Lakers, just as an example. The Lakers can afford to bring in somebody who maybe isn't as experienced, or maybe, like the Nets bringing in Steve Nash. Steve Nash, very experienced guy, clearly a great leader, clearly, a good fit as a head coach in the league. But what does he really have? Steve Nash is a Hall of Fame caliber player, like did all this great stuff in the league. So you can kind of start putting dots together as how he would work out as a head coach. What I think is so interesting, about any of these examples. I mean, you can obviously Johnny Bryant, as you were just saying, has the Utah Jazz connection. You look at Will Hardy in Boston, like there are these guys around. There are assistants around who are getting ready to take head coaching positions. But as usual for the Utah Jazz, you can't just go and get anybody. It can't just be, well, Johnny Bryant's got a relationship with Don and the organization, and so that's why he's a good fit. I understand that Don probably wants a young, energetic black head coach. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I think that would be a really good move as long as there is a plan in place to continue to contend, because Donovan Mitchell can't have it both ways. And this isn't an indictment on him, but I think it's a really relevant thing. As a player, as the guy, as the face of the organization, you can't on one hand say, hey, we have to win, or I'm going to start looking at options. Not that he's technically said that, but there's a lot of smoke around that concept. So you can't have that narrative, but then also have, well, I want a young black head coach who's inexperienced. Those two don't play together typically. So it's going to be really interesting to me to see, how do those two come together? How do you find a young, energetic, new voice who can come in and lead this thing, but also win at the same time? That's why I think ultimately with the Danny Ainge angle, that's why Danny Ainge is so important here. Because Danny Ainge has the ability to build a roster regardless of who the head coach is. It'd be nice if that head coach agreed with the route they were taking. But I think ultimately their goal is to make sure that Don is relatively happy, that the head coach is a good fit with the roster they envision them building, and then ultimately they can go and get to the Western Conference Finals. Because I really don't think we should be talking about championships with this team until they prove they can get to the Western Conference Finals.
Well, I think that is the last requirement. Honestly, how much input should Donovan Mitchell have? I mean, I think that is a huge question. This Andy Larson thing with Donovan Mitchell, I don't know how else to classify this. I mean, if you didn't see what Andy was tweeting, he was saying that Donovan Mitchell is essentially puppeting the Utah Jazz behind the scenes, using his agent. Don is represented by CAA. I know his agents pretty well. CAA also represents Adrian Wojnarowski at ESPN, who broke this story. Woj also tweeted that Donovan Mitchell is unsettled and surprised by Quin Snyder quitting. Could not be further from the truth. Donovan Mitchell knew this was going to happen. I think the finality of it probably hit his players hard here in Utah.
Yeah.
Donovan Mitchell is not stunned, shocked, unsettled. None of that, from what I understand. He knew. I talked to somebody in Donovan's circle last week, right before we left on our trip. And I was told that Donovan is committed to this team in the long term. That he was, and I had inquired about the island trip.
Yeah.
Don had been on essentially a working trip in the islands with his trainer and a couple of other players, getting ready for next season. And I'm told he is at peace and working hard to have the best 2023 he can have.
Yeah.
2022, 2023 he can have. So this is not at all shocking. So, of course, Andy Larson comes out of, Area 51 with a conspiracy theory that Donovan Mitchell is pulling strings behind the scenes, and he's actually making the decision as who the next head coach is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, what he's saying is that Johnny Bryant, Adrian Wojnarowski, and Donovan Mitchell are all represented by CAA, and that Donovan Mitchell is essentially using his agent to puppet Woj into tweeting negative things so that Don can have leverage over the organization. And I just think, look, again, we're not a show that goes out of its way to bash the media, I would say, but it just seems like there's a lot of ridiculous things that get run out here, just like we did with the him or me tweet about Rudy Gobert or any of these other situations. I have to say, reading that out of Andy Larson, with all due respect, reading that, I'm just like, dude, do you think that Don has no sway in the organization already? Do you think that there's not a relationship there?
But the bigger issue is the Salt Lake Tribune printed that.
Yeah.
And again, I do not mind telling you, I canceled my subscription because of Andy's run-in with Donovan Mitchell in Dallas. because of this ridiculousness that Andy tweeted about what Donovan was saying to the Dallas bench with no foundation, no proof, no evidence. And Andy had to apologize. That's when you lost my money. So now you print a conspiracy theory about his agent?
It's ridiculous.
I don't understand the media in this town.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I really don't. Can you please do some math here? I mean, you know that Donovan Mitchell and again, not to keep telling you what we've reported, but in January, we were telling you that Donovan Mitchell had a meeting with Danny Ainge and Ryan Smith, and that Ryan Smith told him, we're going to build this team around you.
Yep.
They are Ryan Smith, from what I was told last week, Ryan Smith and Donovan Mitchell are in regular contact.
Yeah.
Like they have an open relationship. They talk all the time. This is not shocking or stunning.
No.
He knows what's going on. He's your best player.
Yeah.
He is your star player. Nothing that happens in this organization can be a surprise to Don, and this certainly was not. Why are you printing this in the paper?
Yeah,
Why are you tweeting about this as the beat writer for the Utah Jazz? Why are you tweeting about this?
Is anybody really surprised? Just generally speaking, like to your point, is anybody surprised about this Quin situation? Anybody who follows this team, anybody would not be surprised by this, mainly because you can put 2 and 2 together. Hey, it was a tough season. Hey, it's been a really difficult run. Hey, you got bounced by Dallas, a team that you felt like you should have beat. Anybody can say, okay, we kind of understand where Quin is coming from. So to sit here and say that Don is somehow shocked and surprised, and I think the verbiage Woj used was like unnerved. It's crazy to me. Don knew this was coming. And my feeling is, and really this is just more of a hope of mine. It's an opinion / hope of mine. My hope is that the organization had a pretty good idea Quin was going to resign, and it was really more of a formality internally. That's what I hope the case was, because if that was the case internally, then the front office team already has a plan in place. They know candidates they're looking at. Obviously, the Johnny Bryants of the world are going to get calls and interviews and stuff, I'm sure. But I'm sure Danny Ainge has somebody who he's like, all right, in a perfect world, this is the guy we would go and get. I don't know who that is, but all I'm simply saying is this would come as no surprise to Don or anyone in the organization or anybody in the media that Quin resigned. It's just not the situation, man.
Yeah, and I think if you were a betting man, you would have bet that Quin was going to return. But I think, and again, we were talking about it last Wednesday when we did the show. There was what's the right way to say it? There was damage to the relationship between Quin Snyder and this front office and this team at the trade deadline. The Joe Ingles trade was probably the final nail in this decision.
You don't go out and say that, hey, we're going to do something meaningful at the deadline. Like you don't say that or like send that messaging and then do that one deal and that's it, and then watch Spencer Dinwiddie light your ass up in the playoffs.
Well, the hard part is that Quin and Joe Ingles were very close.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I've heard repeatedly over the last couple of months is that Quin Snyder relied heavily on Joe Ingles for leadership. And I don't necessarily believe that trading Joe Ingles upset Quin Snyder. It was the clear, obvious move to make. But they got nothing in return.
Yeah.
And I do believe that his lack of minutes for Nickeil Alexander-Walker was proving a point to this front office. I believe that. I've heard that more than once about why Nickeil Alexander-Walker did not play very often, and certainly not in the postseason. And I think this was proving a point. I think Quin Snyder was very upset about Joe Ingles and that deal.
Yeah.
And I think so little in return, and I think so little movement. I think that those incidents, and I'm trying to measure my words because I don't want to go too far with it, but I think that the Joe Ingles situation, that trade, did some irreparable damage to the relationship between Quin Snyder and this front office. And I think, unfortunately, when you gamble and you play poker and lose, there's real damage done.
Yeah.
And that's what they did with Joe Ingles' contract. They played poker and they lost.
Yeah.
And they probably could not hold their water just long enough to make a significant deal. I mean, and again, I think we've talked about this ad nauseum. I'm telling you again that they had an opportunity to trade Rudy Gobert, and they did not do it. You're paying for that non-move. If they do not trade Rudy Gobert over the summer, they're going to pay for that this coming season.
Yeah.
You cannot, in my opinion, just run it back with this roster. That's just not an option. And I don't believe they're going to do that. I continue to believe, and I continue to hear that they're going to do everything that they can do to remake this roster around Donovan Mitchell. I don't believe that Donovan Mitchell is unnerved. I don't believe that Donovan Mitchell is upset and questioning his future in Utah. Like, stop. There's just no need for it. Anybody that is shocked or surprised by this move hasn't been paying attention.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times we can say it. I am not at all surprised that this happened. We've been telling you this for months. And I think the thing that is surprising is the timing of it. That's the one thing that I think is a real indicator that what we told you last Wednesday was absolutely true. Quin Snyder wanted influence over this roster. He wanted to have a say in who he was going to coach. And when that was taken off the table, there was no decision to be made. That essentially made the decision for them. So I don't know. I think this Andy Larson thing is a real problem for the Salt Lake Tribune.
Yeah. And
the fact that he wrote it and editors cleared it is embarrassing. It is a blight on the face of the media here. Is he wrong that could be going on? No, I don't think he's wrong. Why would it be a problem? Why would that be a negative? If you're Donovan Mitchell, I'll go back to the guys I've covered. This is no different than Kobe Bryant. This is no different than Magic Johnson. This is no different than Michael Jordan.
LeBron.
This is no different than LeBron James.
Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving that whole thing.
There's no difference.
Come on.
This is how the NBA is run. And it is shocking to me that the Salt Lake Tribune would publish this kind of trash. It just is. It's why I don't spend my money there. I know for a fact I'm not getting this from the Athletic.
Yeah.
When I subscribe to Tony Jones. And I didn't say subscribe to the Athletic. I subscribe to Tony Jones. He's the one guy in this town that you can believe in when it comes to Jazz reporting. And with all due respect, and I respect Eric Walden's work, I do. I just, when I look at the landscape of people that cover this team, it is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. The lack of sourcing, the lack of reporting. People at the Jazz talk to me about this more than I'd like.
Yeah.
And frankly, I just don't understand it. There are very few relationships with the media and players or executives in this town. And it is surprising to me that I think there are probably two guys that I would trust on the Jazz because I know they have relationships: Tony Jones and Spence Checketts. That's it. Anything from anybody else, I think, is pure speculation, and it's stunning to me.
Yeah,
it's
and
stunning.
I think the summer time when you're not playing basketball tends to bring this stuff out. By the way, I think whether we're talking about the Jazz media circle or really just in the sports landscape, I think the off season tends to, bring out some really interesting angles. And that's, again, we don't just open the show and say to ourselves, all right, we're just going to say how many times that we've reported something that's actually come true. The reason we say that is because we're interested in reporting things that actually do come true, things that are relevant, things that have substance. And so to me, it's not even the issue with the Andy stuff and really just the Salt Lake media in general is not specifically what they're reporting. It's how they go about it. It's the timing of it. It's the messaging it sends. And I think your best point there is, Andy did kind of, maybe it's strong to say went after Donovan. He didn't really go after Donovan personally with that stuff in Dallas and the bench and everything. But to be writing that and then to say this, it just doesn't send a great message.
With no facts attached to it.
And then to have to issue the apology,
to have Donovan Mitchell get after you on Twitter and then you completely back down.
Yeah.
Get out of here. It's amazing. And again, I want to say I don't know any of these guys personally. I am acquaintances at best with Tony Jones. We knew each other quite well when I lived here previously and worked at KFAN, but I don't know these guys personally. I don't believe I've ever met Andy Larson. I haven't met Sarah Todd or Eric Walden.
Well, you've met him on Twitter. Isn't that what matters?
Yeah, exactly. I base them, I talk about them solely based on their professionalism and their work, and it's stunning to me.
Yeah.
It is really stunning to me. All right, let's get some of your thoughts in here on Quin Snyder, Eric and Raleigh. Good morning to you. First one in. Good night for Eric and Raleigh, who is a huge Dubs fan. To any idiots who say this is good, you must have loved the Ty Corbin years.
Seriously.
Yeah, the blind swordsman, that's exactly right. I mean, this is a big, big loss. And I think you look at the pool of guys that are going to get interviewed for this job.
Yeah.
Johnny Bryant is, in my opinion, he's going to be a good coach. He is going to be a good coach. But when I look at Terry Stotts is not going to get hired for this job. He's not.
Well, and I don't think he's the right guy, honestly. Like, you look at Terry, and he's done some good things in the league. He'd be a reliable hire. You know what you'd be getting out of him.
You won't win.
But you won't win. Yeah, that's the biggest thing that stands out to me.
I think, and as I tweeted last night, I was told Terry Stotts, Will Hardy in Boston, Charles Lee in Milwaukee are those are three guys that are going to get interviews. Johnny Bryant's certainly going to get an interview. And I think depending on what happens in Charlotte, I think you would absolutely look at Kenny Atkinson. But it just depends on who you think is going to get that job. I mean, again, teams cannot announce significant moves or make news during the NBA Finals by rule.
Yeah.
You have to wait until the NBA Finals are over to announce hires like this. So you look at Charlotte, they've got a coach, from what I understand, they've got a coach under contract now. They have an agreement in place, so it'll be interesting to see who that is. My guess is it's Mike D'Antoni or Kenny Atkinson. Those are two great hires for Charlotte.
Yeah.
But if I had to guess, I would think Will Hardy or Johnny Bryant are going to get this job. Charles Lee is going to be a fantastic head coach in the NBA. I would love to see. I think, honestly, if it were me, I would interview those three, and that would be it. Yeah. Will Hardy, Charles Lee, and Johnny Bryant would be my three candidates. And I just think what you've seen out of, player development from all three of those guys, that's the biggest thing with Johnny Bryant. He's a fantastic talent development guy.
Yeah.
So that's what you're excited about with him. But we'll see. It's going to be very interesting to see, who they wind up hiring. Jesus Christ destroys atheism. Bless you, sir. You guys were right 100% about Quinn. I think you guys talked about this, and a lot of stuff you are saying is coming to pass. People need to give you guys more credit.
God
it is
bless.
what it is. I appreciate
More
you
credit
saying that.
comes in time.
You guys nailed it, Steve says. Appreciate that. Neville93 says, good morning, guys. Hope you guys had fun at Yellowstone. Was amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I still smell campfire smoke, though.
Yeah.
I was taking it. You want to know what's like? We lit huge fires every night.
Yeah.
And I was taking my first real shower since like Thursday morning. And last night I'm taking this shower, and it's just one of the most disgusting showers I've ever taken. Like, the smell of campfire was like washing off of me. It was terrible. Terrible. Tanner Plummer says, morning, guys. Happy D-Day.
Hey, guys.
Okay. Andrew Golubov says, first Snyder, hope the next is Spida. Yeah, you can keep hoping, but I wouldn't hold your breath. Jesus Christ destroys atheism says, Monty, you yourself actually said if Quinn doesn't coach, he's going to retire. Well,
No, he never said that.
I didn't say he was going to retire. I've never said that.
Yeah.
I think he's going to take this year off.
Yeah.
I think Quinn needs a break. And again, not to be redundant because I know I just said this, but he needs a break.
Yeah.
I think physically he needs time to properly rehab that hip. He's had double hip replacement surgery now. Both are replaced. That is a very serious procedure, and it takes a physical toll on you. I think Quinn puts his every heart and soul into this job every day. And so he needs a break. I think a year off will be good for him. And I do think he will replace Greg Popovich in San Antonio.
And by the way, I just want to point out we see this all the time. Like head coaches who have been in a gig for first of all, I guess what we should say is we don't see head coaches who coach almost a decade with one team a lot.
It's
anymore.
very rare.
You don't see that as much. But for the guys who do or have done it, you do see most of those guys take a year. Some have taken 2, and then they come back refreshed and ready to go again. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think, and I'm not saying you're wrong about the hip thing or that dynamic, but honestly, even if his hip was good, I still think he would need the year off. Honestly, like I think he just needs that time to let his brain like come back and be happy again.
And he's got
feel
young
refreshed.
kids and a family.
Like, go be with your family. Go enjoy life for a minute. Money is hardly a concern. Like, just go and do you for a year and then come back ready to go.
Yeah. Can he take a job now? Quin could. I mean, he's got a year left. So the Jazz would be entitled to compensation. But he quit. He walked away. So that contract is still valid. Contract law is pretty straightforward. I mean, the only way that he could go take any job he wanted is if he was fired by the Jazz, and he wasn't. He resigned. So he will have to sit that year out. Rudy Sanchez says, any word on Mitchell's feelings about the situation? And as I stated, I think this is I think Donovan Mitchell would look at this as an opportunity. I don't believe this has any impact on his future with the Jazz in the immediate time. I really don't.
And I think what's important is, again, just put yourself in Donovan Mitchell's shoes. Let's not be ridiculous. Let's not be outlandish. Like, let's just be sensible. As I always say on the show when we're in silly season, be sensible. You're Donovan Mitchell. What do you know? All right, well, you've known for months that Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge are going to remake the roster, so you already knew roster change was coming, which ultimately is an opportunity. Then you caught some rumors and some smoke about maybe Quin was going to step away from the team. So again, I just want to keep saying this and pointing this out repeatedly. It's no surprise to Donovan Mitchell that this happened. Is he disappointed? Could he be disappointed or could he be a little sad about it? Well, sure. But I think that's any star player who loses a head coach that you've been with for a long time and been through a lot of stuff. Don't forget, they went through the bubble. They went through the thing we're not allowed to talk about on this show because YouTube hates it, right? Like, they went through all that together. They've gone through a lot of adversity together. So that's what I'm saying. This isn't just, oh, well, the Jazz suck and I hate this organization and I'm leaving. That's not what this is. This is, hey, this guy has been my coach for a long time now. And now we're starting new with someone else. So I think there's a natural progression that plays out, but I just can't get down with this concept that, oh, well, he's going to the Knicks now, or he's going to the Heat, or he's going out east. Like, I can't. That's just not what's happening here. I agree with you. Donovan Mitchell is probably saying to himself, damn, I'm getting a new head coach. We're getting new players. I better be ready to go. I mean, this is a time when I have to come out in training camp in the best shape, ready to go, so I can make a statement about who I am to this team. And I think all the best guys do that. And that's what I'm telling you. Don't be surprised if Donovan Mitchell has a career year individually this coming year.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I find it very interesting that, I'm sitting here like talking to one of the guys I know. And I just think that one of the things that is fascinating to me is that there's so many conspiracy theories out there. And there's so many people who, I'm not going to say make stuff up, but there's so many people who try to read tea leaves and report.
They reach.
I'm just telling you now that this thing with Andy Larson is very interesting because I just think that the CAA ties are very clear. Those are very, very out in the open. But having worked at ESPN a little bit, understanding the culture there, understanding just how flipping high the bar is in Bristol.
Yeah.
To understand what you have to do, even for Woj, to report something. To run it like, oh, well, it's a CAA conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Do you understand how unpassable that is at ESPN?
Infowars.com.
It's not something that ESPN would tolerate.
Yeah.
And I think that's why you're seeing all of the things that happened around Adam Schefter with the Washington football team and all of those emails.
Yeah.
And ESPN doesn't take that stuff lightly. You can like ESPN, you can hate ESPN. They have an incredibly high bar for stuff like this. So I don't know, man. I think when you're looking at Quinn and you're looking at the way business is done in this league, nothing that Donovan Mitchell is doing now would surprise me. If he had his agent calling Ryan Smith, I'd be stunned.
Yeah.
They talk to each other. They don't talk through Ryan Smith and Donovan Mitchell. This is the other thing that's amazing. Ryan Smith and Donovan Mitchell don't like go through his agent to communicate. Do you think Ryan Smith calls saying, well, hey, can you get Don on the phone for me? He's paying him $20+ million a year. He's got his phone number. He's got a direct line to him.
Yeah.
All right, like, what are you thinking?
And that's the thing. See, that's
man.
And again, I I have to say, I don't want to, blow it out of proportion about just how silly the tweet is, but like that's the problem with it. It doesn't just come down to whether it's factual or not, or whether there's any substance to it. Like, yes, that is the surface level conversation, but again, and I'm just going to keep pointing this out. Put yourself in Donovan Mitchell's shoes. Don's on Twitter. We all know he's on Twitter. It's no surprise, right? Like, everybody's on Twitter. Don's looking at this. I guarantee you Don saw this. And Don is probably saying, dude, don't you think that me and Ryan have a relationship? Don't you think that if I had an issue with Ryan, I would just call him and tell him? Don't you think that I could communicate to the team that I play for, to the team that I am the guy for? Don't you think that I'm a phone call away from Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, Ryan Smith, like anybody? Dude's got everyone's phone number, and everyone has his phone number. It's not some like runaround. And when I read it, that was kind of my first initial thought. Like, do you think that these guys just work through all the agents and CAA just runs the entire league or something?
No.
Like, that's not how it works.
And again, just because I'm talking to a guy I know, he makes a really good point. Woj has very strong relationships. Guarantee you he knows Steve Wade. Do you really think Woj needs help from his agent to break stories? No, I don't. I really don't think that he needs help from his agent to break stories. Like, that's the best part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
You're not leveraging Adrian Wojnarowski, man.
Nah.
Get out of here. Anyway, Spencer Morgan, good morning to you, sir. He says, guys, be honest. You've been saying all along the most likely thing would be that Snyder coaches the team next year. Yeah, I do think
that was one of the most likely scenarios.
I think what I just said a few minutes ago, if you're a betting man, you would bet that Quin Snyder would return. But I think, as we said last week, I really felt like he was going to resign. I mean, I just didn't see any way that they were going to get past this situation where he wanted input on the roster. And it's on tape. I mean, please feel free to go back and listen to last Wednesday's show. We talked all about it. It's on our YouTube channel, The Monty Show, MONTY, themontyshow.com. You can get it right on our YouTube channel. Like, he wanted control of the roster. They were not willing to give it to him. He wanted input, not control. He wanted input. They essentially, as it was explained to me, Quin Snyder wanted the ability to say, nah, I don't know. I don't want that guy. He doesn't fit into my system.
I don't want you to bring in, NAW for Joe Ingles. I'm not really feeling that deal.
Mark my words. So I hope somebody asked today. The press conference is must listen. You have got to
have that tomorrow.
You have got to be in on this press conference with Quin Snyder and Ryan Smith. Somebody please ask Ryan or ask Quin Snyder. Ask him about how he felt when Joe Ingles was traded. I doubt he will comment on it. This is my feeling is that the questions that will be asked in this press conference would be very cursory. This is going to be paying tribute to Quin Snyder.
What's next, Quinn? How's the hip? What are your next opportunities?
Do you believe you'll be coaching this year?
How will you remember your time in Utah? What was it like to play or coach Donovan Mitchell? Like, all that stuff will be asked at this press conference today, and it's fine, man. It's fine. But that's not what we're here for. I get it. let's be really clear. First of all, I want to go back to what that commenter said about what we said about Quinn and him coming back. Let's be really clear. The most likely scenario was that he was going to come back.
Oh, yeah.
But they could not get past the, hey, Quinn wanted to have what is called veto power. He wanted the ability to say, I don't like that trade. I'd like to do this, and have the organization respect that. Obviously, it needs to be said, head coaches of any NBA team in like 99.9% of the situations don't have ultimate say.
Well,
Like,
and
it's just not how
Danny's
it
old
works.
school. Danny wants a coach that he can hand players to, and that coach will make the best of it.
Yeah.
Whereas in this style of NBA, I think, and what you're seeing is a big shift in power in the NBA. You look at all the young coaches, guys like Steve Kerr have veto power. Guys like Ime Udoka don't have veto power. Steve Nash, I think that's an evolving situation. It's funny.
Yeah.
I was also chatting with a guy about Steve Nash. There was considerable frustration from Steve Nash to their front office about this Kyrie situation.
But I think what's interesting about that, and this kind of plays into the Quinn thing, and this speaks to the relationship. This is why I think it's really interesting. So Steve Nash and the Nets have a relationship where Steve Nash can say, hey, I'm not happy, and Kevin's definitely not happy about what Kyrie did this year. And we would like to explore ways that we can move on from Kyrie. And what's interesting to me, based on what we see, is that the organization said, yeah, we do too. Dude straight up said that in the press conference. The GM, can't remember his name off the top of my head. Sean Marks straight up said that. Hey, we're going to look at all the opportunities this offseason, which is coach speak for, yeah, we're going to try and trade Kyrie Irving because of that thing we can't talk about on the show and his unwillingness to get the thing that we can't talk about. So that's why I say, like, this whole dynamic, you're probably 100% right about Danny. Like, Danny probably, just wants to hand a coach
He's
players
an old school guy.
and just wants the coach to do the best he can. And I just don't think in today's league that's how it works, because it's in the league to win, you need multiple guys.
And I don't know. I want to make sure that you understand this. This organization, the guys that have real input and real decision-making power, there's two of them. It's Ryan Smith and Danny Ainge with the input of Donovan Mitchell, which in my opinion is exactly how it should be.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it should be, because that's how it is for, again, to your point, Kevin Durant. Do you really think the Nets make a James Harden trade without Kevin Durant knowing? Do you really think that Kevin Durant's not the center of their world? Look at the Lakers. You want to know how it goes bad?
Dude.
You trade for Russell Westbrook because LeBron said to. That's how it goes bad, right? Now, having said that, they won a championship doing that exact thing. So you can say all of this craziness is X, Y, and Z's fault. The bottom line is this is an opportunity for the Utah Jazz to put their ducks in a row. And if you hire Johnny Bryant, there's going to be some tough times.
Yeah.
Because the other question is, who do you assemble for a staff behind a guy who's never been a head coach?
Yep.
Does he take input and allow you to fill his staff with guys? I don't know. You look around this league and you wonder why Mike D'Antoni's been employed the last however many years. Because he's an excellent mentor to a young head coach. Excellent mentor. How did Quin Snyder become one of the elite coaches in the NBA? Because he was mentored by Greg Popovich, one of the best coaches in the NBA. So there are a lot of questions around guys like that. In my opinion, they're going to hire a young coach. They're going to hire an assistant. That's the most likely thing. I just don't think Terry Stotts is the guy that you want to bring in for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
Honestly, Will Hardy, Charles Lee I'm telling you, Charles Lee is going to be an excellent head coach. He will. Johnny Bryant's the right guy probably to hire here. Probably.
Yeah.
You got to go through the interview process, see what he says, see how you feel. The ties are too many to ignore.
Yeah.
He's got comfortability with Rudy and with Don. If you wind up keeping both those guys, if you trade Rudy, he is very good with Donovan Mitchell. Like, there's ties to New York. There's ties to his agent. Like, all of that stuff. That's all those things are in place.
Relationship-wise, it's a really safe hire.
James Knight says he has a handshake deal with the Spurs, in my opinion. Quinn may. We'll see. Neville93 says, this is why I listen to you guys. You're accurate, honest, and don't hide around the bush. I had a feeling this was going to happen with Quinn. Tyler, whoa, hey now. Big comment dump there. Appreciate that. Tyler Hopkins says they print stuff in the paper because they know people will read it, which is total nonsense.
Well, I think it's a fair assessment. I think that part of, I mean, and I have no shame in saying it. Part of YouTubing is getting people to click on your show.
Yeah.
Part of doing a newspaper is getting people to read the
Clickbait's
newspaper.
a real
dude.
thing, man.
It's real.
Clickbait is a real thing. It is absolutely an imperative part. You have to have a good headline writer. Period.
But after that, your substance has to be
You
there.
better pay it off.
Like, you gotta pay it off, and that's why I say, like, again, I don't mean to be the person that bashes the media and like hates on everybody. I'm not even trying to do that, but at a certain point, you have to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, this is a bit too far. The CAA angle, I understand why maybe it's a thought. I could even see if I was tweeting that, I would have said, hey, this is kind of reaching, but just a thought. Maybe this is an angle that's happening. I don't know, but just a thought I had. I would preface it like that. I wouldn't be saying, hey, this is what I think's happening. I just wouldn't do that.
I just think the whole thing is...
It's a joke.
It's crazy.
I mean, it is classic Salt Lake media where you have a situation where people just report stuff to report stuff. And that's why it should be taken personal. If you're inside the Utah Jazz organization, someone like Sean O'Connell tweeting it's him or me about Rudy Gobert and having that be absolutely nonsense.
How come there's no accountability for that? Here's my question. Where's the him or me conversation?
Yeah.
Where's
that been?
Where did that go?
Yeah.
Absolutely nowhere.
And
absolutely nowhere.
It's offensive. It's almost like offensive. Like, I feel it honestly, like the organization, in my opinion, should take it personal when it's getting that far. Like, you're just tweeting stuff to get attention, with all due respect to Sean. Like, that's what you did there, and I get it. You're a UFC guy. You wanted to get attention. I get it. I respect it. But at the same time, dude, at some point in this town, whether it's us or someone else, someone's got to be nails on this stuff. And we have been, but we're not a radio station. We're not the Salt Lake Tribune. We don't have that inherent big boy feel about us. And that's partially why we're successful, but why we also have to grow the audience, right? It works both ways. But what I'm telling you as a listener is listen to the people who give you sensible conversation, not the stuff that's from, as you said, Area 51, which I think is a very realistic analogy. I think that's spot on.
Anytime you're talking about sports, politics or whatever news, that's different. Anytime you're talking about sports and conspiracy theories are used as fact, just know what you're reading.
We got issues.
Just know what you're reading. Snooka, good morning too, friend. He says, I didn't start caring about the Jazz until I started watching the show. Appreciate that. Brandon Whiteside says, then Quinn needs to move to a front office, not sabotage the team because his buddy got moved. That's not at all what he did.
Who's his buddy?
I believe
Joe?
you're referencing Joe Ingles. He relied on Joe Ingles for leadership. He relied on Joe Ingles to be an extension of the coaching staff in the locker room. And I think, obviously, there were signs of trouble last year on this team, even when Joe was here 2 years ago now. But this past season, sure, the facade was broken. People were talking, and I think we were talking about locker room chemistry issues in December. And I think that it's just part and parcel of being an NBA team.
Yeah.
When you lose, bad things happen in the locker room.
But
period.
I want to be really clear. He didn't sabotage the organization. Like, let's be really clear on that. He didn't like blow the organization up or put them in some kind of horrible situation. They're to be really, in my opinion, spot on. When you say to a head coach, hey, we're not giving you the veto power, what you're essentially saying is take it or leave it. That's essentially what you're saying. You're saying,
take what you are given and make the best of it. And
or don't be here. That's essentially what you're saying.
Yeah. Brandon Whiteside says, good Andy Larson pushes back while Tony writes puff pieces. Weird you give Andy crap when he is the only one that's pushing the boundaries. He straight up made up something about Donovan Mitchell.
Twice.
In Dallas. Just made it up.
Yeah.
Like that Don was talking to the bench and saying Donovan Mitchell, like, when it was so wrong that Donovan Mitchell went after him on Twitter and Andy retracted it
What do you mean
and
pushing the
apologized.
limits, dude?
What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? And what puff pieces are you referring to with Tony Jones? I read everything that Tony writes. Like, he's the only reason I subscribe to The Athletic. The only reason. I would not call what Tony Jones does puff pieces. That would be like, and again, I don't know Sarah Todd at all. We've never met. Sarah Todd is a feature writer. She is not somebody that breaks news or reports hard news. Or Sarah Todd's a feature writer, and she's a very talented feature
Yeah, I can
writer.
respect her for that.
Yeah, that's not a knock on her, but she's not like hard news. You want hard news on the Jazz, you go to Tony Jones.
Or us.
I think that's it.